Here's a simple electronic book that I created in Flash that has a title page, which is really an overview of, in this case, basic nutrition. And then I've got a page for fats, one for carbs, and one for proteins. Or when I'm saying page, I really mean frames. That's how it's really constructed. So if I click on the fats button, it takes me to the fats frame. And I can read about why do we need fats to survive. And then I can click the carbs button, or I can click the proteins. And so I'm actually have control of being able to jump to any frame or any page in this book using the menu system. But sometimes we want to also be able to allow users to page through an electronic book going forwards or backwards. And that's what this lesson is going to be on, is how do we create those buttons and program them to let a user go forwards and backwards. And we're going to take a very simple approach in this video, and then in the next video I'm going to show you a better way to do it. So here's my project. I'm going to just create a little triangular button, and to do that I'm going to take the rectangle tool. I'm going to come down to my menu layer, and I'm going to create a rectangle, and then take the free transform tool, and I'm going to rotate it. And then with the selection tool, I'm just going to delete part of it, and there is my triangle. And I'll go ahead and add a stroke to it. And then I'm double click on it. So I select both the fill and the stroke, and then right click, and we're going to convert it to a symbol. And I'll just call it BTN arrow. And then I'll double click on that button to go into the timeline. I'm going to add an overstate. In that overstate, I'm going to change the fill color to yellow. I'll create a downstate. Sort of keyframe there. Select the object, change the fill color this time to magenta, and then I simply want to hit state. I'm just going to insert a frame there, it's the same shape as my button, and go back to scene 1. I'm going to name this button, or give it an instance name of prev_BTN. This will be a previous button. And then I'm going to copy that button. I'll paste it in place. And then we're going to nudge it over here directly to the right. Go to the Modify menu, Transform, we'll flip it horizontally. And we're going to name this button then Next_BTN. And on my actions layer, I'm going to write some code for these. So I first have to add an event listener, and to make it simple, I'm just going to copy this line of code, paste, and make a few changes here. So we had our previous button, and this will be go previous. And then we had our next button. And this will be go next. And I need to create some functions. And I'm going to copy, paste. So here we have go previous. And my statement here is very simple. It's prevFrame, and it's a method, so it needs a set of parentheses. There's no argument it takes, so it's an empty set of parentheses. And that will cause it to go to the previous frame in my timeline. I'm just going to copy that. We'll add our next function. This one's going to be go next. And its code is simply nextFrame. So let's test this. So I can go from page to page linearly using the next button. Now when I get to the end, it doesn't go anywhere. I'm at the very last page, and so nothing happens there, but I can use the previous button to go backwards. So one thing you might do in this very simple approach is to hide those buttons on those two frames. And what I'm going to do is simply take a rectangle tool with a fill of white, and we can do a stroke of none. And I'm going to use my object drawing mode, and on this first frame, which what I'm going to do is simply add another layer, so make it a little bit easier. I'm going to add another layer, and on this first frame, I'm going to draw a rectangle over the top of it. Then I'm going to go to the next frame and insert a keyframe, and I'm going to remove the rectangle on that frame, and go to the last frame, insert a keyframe, and here I'll draw another rectangle over the top of our button. And so now when I test the movie, I don't have a previous button on the first frame. I only have the next button, and then I have both of them, so I can go previous or next, previous or next. And then the last frame, I only have a previous button. Now you'll notice that if I move my mouse over where that next button is, it's still there. It's just hidden by this rectangle. I can tell that it's there because I'm getting the pointer finger with my mouse. So it's interacting with that button there. But it helps to visually at least tell the user there's nothing beyond this page. Same way if we're on the first page, that button is still there. I can actually click on it. Nothing's happening because there's no previous frame to go to. But it's a visual clue to the user that there's nothing before this. In the next video, I'll show you a better way to do this by embedding these two buttons inside movie clips. There's another thing we could also do, and I'm going to bring this other project up. So on this project, I have two buttons, very similar in nature, but they're coded a little bit differently. So I have a previous button and a next button. Let me show you the code. And we're not really quite ready to do this code, but it'll give you an idea of what's possible. So you notice this is the first frame, and I have a previous button here that actually, if I click on it, will go to the last frame. So it becomes a circular previous next throughout all the frames. Here's the actions. So I'm using what we call an if structure inside the previous, that if the current frame is equal to 1, if it's on the first frame, I'm going to go to and stop on my label named France. That is the last frame. Else, I'm going to go to the previous frame. Same way in the next button, I've got an if-else structure, that if the current frame is frame 6, in my last frame, I'm going to go to and stop on frame 1. So going next from the last frame takes me back to the first frame. Otherwise, else, I'm going to go to the next frame. We'll talk more about these if structures in a future video. But that gives you an idea of another way to get around this problem and actually be able to add a little functionality in being able to go in a circular fashion throughout your project, forwards and backwards. Here then is a demonstration of that. I can click the next page button and cycle through these pages. And when I get to the last page and I click the next page, I'm back on the first page. If I click the previous button and I go to the very first frame or first page, click previous, it's going to take me to the last frame. That's what I mean by a circular fashion of navigating linearly through the project.